Well, I'm not sure how it started originally. I've always been sort of concerned about things out in the community, but I really got involved at the time of the Vietnam War when I took part in the vigil for 7 years in front of the Capitol every Wednesday from 12 to 1. So that was one of the major things I did at that time. And of course, we went to Washington several times for demonstrations. But also in that period of time, I was involved in the New York State Legislative Women's Forum, and we studied bills in the legislature and had programs, and I was environmental chairman part of the time, and we studied the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, which, are coming around again now. So that's the trouble with this stuff. I mean, you think you killed it, and it comes around again. Well, mostly it was the weather, I would say. I remember being there about 20 below zero, and it was pretty darn cold. And there were other members of churches there and other people in the community who came regularly. I mean, it wasn't just our tiny group of friends who were there, but people in general who objected to the war were there. And it was sort of a larger community, and people did other things besides that. I had small children at the time, so I kind of focused on that part of it myself.
Tell us, what's a Quaker?
Well, what is a Quaker? Well, the Quakers started back in the 1650s, and they were opposed to war. For starters, and they were opposed to a lot of things that the king did over at that time, but especially they were for peace and for other ways of solving problems, and so we have carried this tradition forward, and so we try to hark back to it when there are situations in front of us that call for some action. Well, one of the earliest Quaker women was married to George Fox, who was really the initiator of the Quaker religion. And she was a very active person. She had a lot to do with organizing the future activities and programs and patterns for Friends from that time on.
It sounds like things are fairly smooth in your protest. Except for the weather, things are fairly smooth. Can you speak a little more about any other ups and downs?
Well, there were people that came by, obviously, who didn't agree with the fact that we were protesting the war. I mean, several people came fairly regularly and kind of chewed us out for our position on that. But there wasn't any, kind of physical confrontation or anything. It was more verbal, but it was there. I mean, it was no peace and friendship. Well, we used to have a peace breakfast once a month at First Presbyterian Church, and Russian Adams cooked the breakfast for us, which was very nice. And sometimes we had speakers and sometimes reports from different groups who were doing special actions. And also she got out a peace calendar using her mimeograph machine, which did everything at that time. There weren't all these modern ways of communicating. So we'd hand out the peace calendars, and sometimes she'd come down to the vigil and distribute them to people as well. So that was one of the things that we routinely did. But there were a lot of other activities that different people took part in. I'm not thinking exactly of specific things, but there were other organizations and church groups and so forth that were involved in this. And another thing that was happening about that same time is we were working on the nuclear freeze program, the call to halt the nuclear arms race, to stop testing, manufacturing, and deploying weapons of mass destruction, particularly nuclear weapons. So we spent a lot of effort on that locally. We had marches. We tried to, maybe Sue has mentioned that because she and her husband were traveling around the country pushing this project. But we were doing it more locally, and we our biggest event was we had 50 house parties all in one night on the final night of MASH, which probably young people don't know what MASH was, but it was a TV program that a lot of people watched. It was about the Korean War and these medical people who were collectively a very interesting group, and also they did good work, but it was a fun program too. So that last day we had all these house parties around and tried to raise money for our nuclear freeze campaign. So, and of course the biggest thing in relation to that was having 1 million people down in Central Park in support of the nuclear freeze. So that was on June 12th, 1982. So June 12th is a very special date in our lives. So, my daughter and I went to the Soviet Union. I mean, part of this whole thing about the nuclear freeze was connection with people in the Soviet Union. And in 1980, we went on this delegation with Promoting Enduring Peace was the name of the organization. And we went to the 5 hero cities. And we talked with people about nuclear weapons and about what needed to be done with people in all different walks of life, and of course had a chance to see what life was like in the Soviet Union. And that was a very important experience for us. And actually I've been to the Soviet Union twice more besides that. So that was part of our idea about trying to connect with other people on the other side of things to see if we could come together and if we could understand each other better and to come to a more diplomatic solution. And that's what's so missing now. I sort of wonder if there are any people working in the State Department diplomacy. I mean, you don't ever hear about anything like that. I mean, it's like it just disappeared. Also, in relation to other things that were happening at that time, there was we were having big actions about Seneca Army Depot and not wanting the Persian missiles to be sent to Europe. And so we had a big demonstration out at Seneca in the central part of the state. And Ruth Pelham actually wrote a song for us. And she used to sometimes write songs for us for the peace breakfast. I mean, she was part of us, definitely. And we're going to look to the people for courage. That was, it's still a good song.
Can you sing it a little bit of it for us?
Well, we can look to the people for courage in the hard times coming ahead. We will something and shout. Hard times coming ahead. Sorry, I wasn't planning to do that.
We're gonna look to the people for courage in the hard times coming ahead. We're gonna sing and shout, we're gonna work it out in the hard times coming ahead.
The sanctuary project, I don't know the exact date. It was in the 80s. It was at the time of the Contra War in Central America, which of course reminds us of what's going on now with the whole immigration situation. those are the places where we stirred up trouble way back in the 80s, and now it's coming back to haunt us. And we worked with a number of other churches at that time. We had people in sanctuary from Central America, from Guatemala and El Salvador, and we had several of those families stay at the meeting house for a while. And we worked with the Unitarians and some of the Catholics. And some people we took up to Canada so that they would be safe, and some people were willing to speak out. So we would arrange for programs and take them to these programs where they could talk about their stories and let a lot of other people in the community understand what was really going on down with the Contra War. Another thing in relation to that, I was supportive of Peace Brigades, which is an accompaniment group that accompanied people who were in danger of being killed, or at least spirited off, or some very difficult thing in the Central American countries. And so they had a delegation that went to Guatemala, and so I went on that delegation, and we were there to accompany people who were coming back from Mexico, where they had been in safety. And there were several hitches about that, so it was held up, and we had to wait another week to be able to go to the border. But we did, and there were 65 buses of people coming back from Mexico to Guatemala City. And Rita Bergerman Chu was there to welcome the people, and they put them up on an army base, wouldn't you know? I mean, that's the way some people think. So anyway, but because of this, all these changes around, we'd kind of run out of time, so that we had to go back home, and with our plane reservations, so that we couldn't stay on to see what happened. They were going to travel around Guatemala and be greeted by people who were waiting for them to come home. So that was a part of our Central America concerns. And now, again, we haven't learned very much because these things are coming back around, and we're having more refugees because of the situation that's left there from the past. So we don't learn very much. We were sitting around one time just chatting in general, and the subject came up about everybody had been in prison, and it turned out that everybody had been in prison except one person who was there from our meeting. And it was incredible. I mean, it just grew out of just a general conversation, and it was so funny. I mean, it was a memorable thing. But in terms of the families, we kept in touch with some of the families that we sent up to Canada for a while, and I think Barbara DiTommaso kept in touch with one of the young men who eventually was able to go on to college, and actually, at least a few years ago, he was working down in Florida for AFSC, and he's now a lawyer, and he's helping people who needed help, who are coming from Central America. So that's a positive story that we can tell. Some of the rest of the people, stayed in Canada, in safety, and some went back. It was hard to keep track of everybody. Yes, the AFSC is a Quaker social justice peace-related organization that's currently working on a number of different peace-related projects all around the world. But in 1947, they were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for helping people after World War II and feeding people in Europe and bringing all that to the attention of other people. So that was something that we're very proud of. And also what they're doing now, they're working on border stuff and all of these things that are of concern to all of us. American Friends Service Committee is a service organization that supported by Quakers and also other people who believe in their message of trying to make the world a better place. So they're working in a number of areas in terms of prison stuff, in terms of economic development, in terms of war and peace issues, and just in general trying to uplift what goes on in this country.
I understand, Karen, your daughter is helping the children who have been taken from their parents.
Well, she and Carrie Keel started a group called Border Watch, and they are concerned about what's happening to the children, obviously. And Karen is a mental health therapist, and a while ago when there were a whole batch of people out at the jail that had been sent there, and the sheriff was glad to get the money for boarding them and stuff like that. But that has ceased, and they are no longer there. But now they're trying to get help for people who are down at the border. Several people in this Border Watch group have been to the border and have seen what's going on there and what conditions the children and families are in. So they're trying to, they showed an amazing film called Icebox, which, shows how people are being held in these prisons and how they don't have, they just have those Mylar or whatever blanket things. I mean, they're not things that are warm. I mean, they're just in terrible conditions, and we've heard about the food and lack of sanitary stuff and whatnot. And so that's been going on for a while. It's hard to say exactly how long, but so that's, and they're planning to show another film and do some other activities. And I guess they're going to be part of this Lights for Liberty thing that's coming up at West Capitol Park, which they're inviting a number of organizations to sign on as co-sponsors. So that will be coming up. And so they're planning other films and outreach to people in the community. I went to one of their meetings the other night, and it's interesting to see sort of a cross-section of people who were there. I mean, you wonder who would be in this group. And there are a lot of different interesting people. In fact, she was telling me about somebody who had just come for the first time a day or two ago, and he had background in Nicaragua many, many years ago. He speaks Spanish fluently, and he has a whole history of family and whatnot in relation to that. So you just never know who's going to show up and be part of the community. Well, I was involved in the alternatives to violence work for about 20 years or so, down in prisons, working with prisoners there and trying to help them see other ways of dealing with crises that they had in their lives or things that came up. And part of the time I was the outside coordinator for that. And I did it mostly at Green Correctional, which is down at Coxsackie. I mean, I have been in some other prisons around, but I sort of focused on the neighborhood prison, I guess you might say. And that was, I learned a lot from these men, and I hope they learned something from our group and what we were trying to do, because many of them have gone on and become facilitators, and some on the outside, have come out and been facilitators in the community. So it really turned their lives around, which is very exciting.
Do you have a moving or touching story about something that happened between you and a prisoner?
Well, I'm still sending Christmas cards to one of them, and this is we had contact a very, very long time ago. He was had a very difficult time, but he was able to move on to a lesser program and then to get home, and he's been home for quite a while. But he has some kind of immune disease, which, has really shut down his life in a large way, which just seems like added to what he had been through before. It's just too much. But he remains cheerful and goes on with his life, and he has a son who's about to go to college, and so there's a happy ending to the story, which is not always the case. Well, in terms of what young people are doing today or can do, I'm very excited about some of the things that young people are doing, especially working for the environment, having this Greta Thunberg get kids all over the world to be striking on Fridays for the environment, and a whole lot of other things that they're doing, and a lot of that's accomplished by the fact that there is social media. So I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, it's some ways it's very helpful, and other ways, if people are just sitting on their phones, it's not. So it depends. But and on gun violence, like the young people from Florida who've been doing all kinds of good programs around it. And, well, I personally think that the two existential threats to our life on Earth are the climate crisis and nuclear weapons. And I think we need to do more about both of those things. And I think people are getting a little bit more concerned about the environment, but I'm very concerned about the nuclear issue, because we've been getting out of several of the treaties that we had with Russia, and we're building more and more new nuclear weapons, as are other people around the world. The whole thing is insane. And so just one or two of those shot off could start the whole thing going downhill and finishing us off, not only people, but animals and the whole life on Earth. So I think that's a very important issue. And of course, the whole idea of military spending in general, aside from just the nuclear part of it, is so destructive, because we're not using the money to help people who need help. We're not building our infrastructure. We're not feeding people. We're not getting jobs for people who really need it. We're not training them in their education. And all of these things we're not doing because we're spending all this money on the military. And the people from the fossil fuel business and from the military contractors, they just have the politicians in their pocket, and we need to have spending limits on what they can do. And so I hope that effort will step up and change things. So the whole idea of suddenly I can't think of the word about what we need to pass, but certainly this fall we're going to be dealing with a military budget, and I certainly hope that people will be out there demanding that we cut the military budget. Can you imagine that? Well, that's what we really need to do, and whether we can rally enough people around to actually do that, who knows? But certainly a worthy goal, and hope you'll join me in that effort.
Thank you.
So we've got to crank up here and get our country back.
Thank you so much.